So I made a video about the beginning of how I got into DDR, and how it was in New York City during that time. It's a pretty long video, and I wanted to make another video to talk about my transition from being a beginning DDR player and what it was like back then to falling into the community and getting more involved in DDR. So at the end of my last video, I had stopped at around the 2002 era. This is when fifth mix is in full swing. All the arcades have fifth mix in New York City, or most of them do anyway. Two of the most important arcades in the city, Broadway City and Chinatown Fair, both have fifth mix. NYDS and Queens have fifth mix. The arcades in Coney Island have fifth mix. So fifth mix is solidly what we're playing. We didn't get, most of the arcades in New York City didn't get fourth mix. If there were any fourth mixes around, they weren't really accessible. I think that there was an arcade in City Island all the way up in by the Bronx that might have had a fourth mix, and maybe somewhere in Staten Island might have had a fourth mix, but I wasn't aware of that. I don't think I played fourth mix when it was the last mix. So, like I said in my previous video, me and my cousin are going to the arcade. We're going to Chinatown Fair. We're going to Broadway City to play DDR. We also went to Flushing Mall to go play DDR. There was an arcade in the mall there. So we were all over the place playing DDR. We were on DDR Freak. And I started meeting more and more people in the community who play DDR as well. At the time, I had a friend, who's still one of my best friends to this day, my friend Izzy. I went to high school with Izzy, and me and Izzy hung out together a lot. Izzy was also into video games, and we because I was playing DDR, he also kind of got into DDR as well. So he started playing DDR, and he got into the community too. So then after a while, it was me and Izzy and my cousin Shayna. So all three of us were playing DDR together. And then I had another friend from high school named Fernando, and Fernando was a dancer too. So I don't remember how Fernando found out that I was playing DDR, because after we graduated high school, we would all still keep in touch. But I remember Fernando finding out I played this dancing video game, and he was like, yo, Aunt, why didn't you tell me that you were playing this video game, the community and the dances and the routines? You should have told me. So then Fernando started playing. So at one point, when I was still fresh, but fifth mix was the mix, it was me, Shayna, Izzy, and Fernando. And I forgot the name. We came up with a DDR group. We came up with a DDR team, and I can't remember the name of the team. But that was the first time that I was in a DDR team, because back then there was also these little crews, DDR teams or DDR crews. Just the same way in the 70s and the 80s, breakdancing became a big deal in New York City. This is kind of a miniature version of that. And I'll probably make another video just on the DDR crews in New York City during that time. But I can't remember the name of our crew, but it was the four of us. We were in a DDR crew, it was so cool, and me and Fernando tried to come up with a dancing routine to this song that was on fifth mix called My Generation, which was a pretty cool song. I don't know if they have that song in DDR anymore, the newer mixes, but it was a DDR sounding song. So me and Fernando tried to come up with a routine for My Generation. Again, we were going to do that at Broadway City, because Broadway City was the arcade to do any DDR routines that you came up with. And Fernando, he ordered a DDR mat. And at the time, almost everybody at the time who played at home had the plastic DDR mat, the $30 joint. And you just, you duct taped it to your floor, you taped it to your floor so it didn't slide around or whatever. But it was it wasn't good, but it was better than nothing. And I think your only other option was to like spend a lot of money. I think that there was like a arcade quality metal DDR mat that Konami is the company who makes DDR, and I think they made one, but it was like a lot of money. Nobody had that. And there were DDR mats that you can order online. I don't know if eBay was around back then, but wherever like my friend Fernando ordered his pad from, it was like this hard plastic DDR pad, and the arrows were like these big plastic circles, and like for the time period, it was a really good DDR pad. So I would go over his house and play DDR on his pad. And it was just like, I don't know how long this lasted, because Fernando stopped playing after a little bit, and Izzy stopped playing after a little bit, but it might have been like 3 or so months of just like me, Shayna, Fernando, and Izzy. Like, this was my group. Like, there were people who played DDR from all over the city that would go to Broadway City, but Shayna, Izzy, Fernando, and me, that was like my group. And that was really wholesome. Like, it was fun. After a while, Fernando and Izzy stopped playing. Me and Shayna continued to play, and we continued to play at Broadway City, and we continued to play at Chinatown Fair and NYDS, and I would go down to Coney Island every once in a while. Still, this is during the Fifth Mix era. Now, at the time, people were still doing dance routines on the machine, and a lot of people who would go to Broadway City would do their dance routines, and I would notice like the same people were like really good at this. I don't know what the general consensus would be for people who played back then of like who was the best, but in my eyes, this one player, Andre, his name was Andre, but his nickname was Stealth Star, and he would pick any song and make it look fun. It could be the most boring song, and he would get on the pad and just like freestyle the song, no routine, just come up with a freestyle and just make it look fun. And then everybody who played with him, there was like Nate, Nat, Darwin. Like, I don't know if they had an official group, but these guys were like so fun to watch on the pad. And when it comes to freestyle, like they, to me, like embodied a lot of what New York City DDR, the beginnings of freestyle, was. So I would watch them play, and they would just, I would be struggling to like pass a song on easy or medium difficulty, and they would play the same song and make it look like it was like a walk in the park and just have a good time playing the song. And that was really cool to watch them do that. They were all a little bit older than me, I believe, because at the time I'm like 18 years old or so. They were all maybe like in their early 20s. The best player, or one of the best players in New York at the time in terms of score, or what we would call perfect attack, when you would step on the arrows and try to get like a perfect score for each arrow, was Sean. His nickname was Ironfoot, and he was like the best player at the time, or one of the best players. When I started playing DDR, like the tail end of Third Mix, I didn't even know what Sean looked like. I didn't know what Ironfoot looked like. I just heard his name so much. It wasn't until Fifth Mix that I even saw what Sean looked like. There was another player who was really good at the time, and his nickname was Perfect Asymmetry. And that's Deshaun. Me and Deshaun are also very good friends. But when I heard Perfect Asymmetry, like, he was also really good. And I don't know what arcade Deshaun would say he belonged to or he played the most, but I don't think that I used to see Deshaun at Broadway City a lot when I started playing. So he was really good. And then there was Vagrant Fiend. That was his nickname. His real name was Jimin. Jimin was also very good. Jimin had like this technique where he would be really stiff and hold his arms really still when he would step on the arrows, and like that was his technique. And then there was Jeff. Why can't I remember? Sarcastic Mofo. I couldn't remember Jeff's nickname. Jeff's nickname was Sarcastic Mofo, and he was also really good. Jeff was kind of tall. He was like a slim, tall guy, and he was good at DDR as well. So you got all these people who were like good at getting perfects, and then you have the people that I was talking about a couple minutes ago who were good at freestyle. And then you had this guy who used to go to Broadway City. His name was Stephen. Stephen had 2 nicknames. I don't remember which one was first. I think it was Superman, but I could be wrong. If Stephen sees this video, he can correct me, but I think his first nickname was Superman on like the DDR Freak forums or whatever. And Stephen was interesting because Stephen knew how to freestyle, but he was also good at perfect attack. And that's kind of like, that caught my attention because I didn't know Stephen yet that well, but I always thought it was cool that he could do what the freestylers did, but also do what the people who were like technically good at the game could do. So I used to watch Stephen a lot. At first, Stephen was part of a DDR crew. I can't remember the name of it. I would like to make a video just on like DDR crews. It'll come to me if I think about it long enough. But he was part of a DDR crew, and that kind of dissolved. Like they just kind of fell apart. And then him and another DDR player named Omar, or nickname Officer O, started this DDR crew called DDPD, Dance Dance Police Department. So they were in DDPD, and their thing was like they used to stealth songs. So what you could do in DDR is you can memorize the steps to an entire song. So you could do it without looking, and you can shut the arrows off on the machine, so that if you step on the correct arrow, you'll still get like a perfect score. And that was stealthing a song. Now, I was interested in stealthing songs independent of Omar and Stephen because I just thought it was cool to memorize an entire like 1.5, 2-minute song with like 100, 200 arrows in it. So I started stealthing stuff. The first song that I stealthed was the song on 5th Mix called Moving On. And then I stealthed this song that originally came out in 4th Mix that they put in 5th Mix called In the Heat of the Night. 2 really good songs. And so I started stealthing stuff. And I think that kind of caught the attention of Stephen and Omar. So I remember they asked me to be part of their DDR crew, DDPD. So that's how I wound up being in DDPD. At the time, it was like a really cool thing that they approached me and asked me to be in DDPD. I thought that was really cool. And so it was the 3 of us. And then there was another guy who used to play DDR a lot in Chinatown Fair in Broadway City. His name was Edwin. His nickname was Jing. And he used to stealth stuff as well. He was really good at spinning on the pad. That was like also really cool to do at the time back then. And so he was in DDPD also. So it was me, Stephen, Omar, Edwin, and another guy who used to stealth stuff named Angel, and his nickname was Fat Axel. And so he wound up getting into DDPD. So it was all of us. And I can't remember if there was anybody else originally in DDPD. It might have been Osh. I don't remember if Osh was originally in DDPD or not. But Osh was another player. He was kind of like Stephen, where he knew how to freestyle, but he also knew how to play technically. And Osh may or may not have been in DDPD, but it was all of us, and we had this crew, DDPD. And I can't remember if Shayna was in DDPD just off of GP. I can't remember, but that was like our crew. And that's when I started playing DDR with people aside from my cousin. And I would go to Broadway City. I would meet up with Omar and Stephen. We would go on the pad on a Friday night. I would stealth Moving On or In the Heat of the Night. And I'd do it backwards. We would stealth stuff and we wouldn't even face the screen. So people who didn't know anything about DDR, bystanders, would think that we were like geniuses at the game. Like, I still wasn't good at getting perfects or anything. I just memorized songs, and at that time I started playing on heavy. So my first heavy song was like I think my first heavy song was this song called Kick the Can. Like, if you played back then, that was everybody's first heavy song because it didn't make you double step, like use the same foot on two different arrows that was separated by an eighth of a note. So everybody played Kick the Can first. This is a fifth mix song. I think Kick the Can might have been from fourth mix and they put it on fifth mix, but Kick the Can was like everybody's first heavy song, and that was one of my first heavy songs. And my second heavy song was, I think, Moving On, because I loved the way it sounded so much, and I stealthed that song. I memorized the whole song. I was like a little over 300 steps. And then In the Heat of the Night was also a popular song because it was like an easy-ish kind of song, and I memorized In the Heat of the Night also. I never stealthed Kick the Can, but I was playing on heavy. And I was playing with Stefan and Omar, and sometimes Edwin would come up, and Fat Axel. Me and Fat Axel, Angel, that wound up becoming like one of my best friends. Like, I'm his son's godfather, he's my daughter's godfather. Like, him and Ash, who's Devil in Black, these are like some of my best friends. So, you know, I'm playing more and more DDR with them. And this is all mostly Broadway City. It's worth noting that Broadway City had these two guys that worked there. They were the technicians that worked there. These two Polish American guys, Andre and Wojtek. And like, these guys were like obsessed with DDR. And they really weren't that good at DDR, but they loved watching us play. And they were really good friends with Stefan. So if they were there and none of their managers were looking, they would give us free credits all the time. And that also helped me get better at DDR and get more involved in the community. I don't think that they like posted on like DDR Freak or anything, but they were really good. Anybody who remembers them back then, they were like obsessed with the song Insertion. And so like, if they paid for your credit, if they gave you a free credit, they would like let you pick two songs, but they would have to have you'd have to play Insertion for them. They would be like you have to play Insertion. And then they would refer to the end of Insertion. If anybody remembers the step chart for Insertion, they would refer to it as hell. I don't know why. Like, to them, it was like, to them, this is like max 300 to them. And they couldn't really pass Insertion, but like, they were obsessed with the end of Insertion. So like, they would make you play Insertion, and then when you would get to the end, they would watch you play it, and they'd talk to you about it too. They'd be like, so when you get to hell, like, how do you do this twist or that twist? I don't know. Like, to them, this was like, it was amazing if you could pass Insertion. And like, this is like more and more of me playing and getting into the community. Look, this is not me becoming like really, really competitive yet, because I think that also requires like a different video. This is just me like going from like a super beginner player to like more so part of the community and getting involved. I tried to do a little bit of Perfect Attack, and like I tried to make routines with my cousin and my friend Fernando, but I never really got into like making routines yet. My claim to fame, this is kind of skipping ahead in time a little bit, but my claim to fame for making a routine was Paranoia K-Set. This routine kind of spread around a lot, but like, as like just the story for K-Set was that I've been playing DDR. I don't know when I made K-Set. It might have been like 7th mix around, or maybe the beginning of Extreme, but Stefan and Ash freestyled to Paranoia Evolution, and other people have freestyles to other songs, and by just like out of respect, you didn't do a freestyle to somebody else's song. That's kind of just, that was like a unspoken agreement that we all had. Like, if Stefan did Paranoia Evolution, you didn't want to copy his freestyle and then go do it at another arcade when he wasn't there. So I didn't want to do Paranoia Evolution. I saw Stefan also freestyle to I saw him freestyle regular Paranoia. He stealth Paranoia Rebirth. And Ash had a couple of freestyles. There was another DDR player who was good at like technical play, but he was really good at freestyle, who was also a good friend of mine back then, named Julio. His nickname was Visor. And Julio had a good 3 or 4 songs that he would do that you didn't want to do that. You don't want to copy people and try to pass it off as your own. It was almost like plagiarizing. He would do a freestyle to Stomp to My Beat. So you just didn't want to touch other people's songs. So one day I remember I was in Staten Island playing DDR in Fun Station Arcade, and I saw Stefan play Paranoia Max. He freestyled to Paranoia Max on Heavy. So I was like, damn, I can't even do that because Stefan just did that. So I went through all the Paranoias, and I was like, well, what's left? Paranoia was just like a cool song to freestyle to. I was like, what's left? So it was Paranoia Eternal, and Paranoia Eternal just sounded horrible, and the steps were really bad, and I was like, I'm not freestyling to that. So I was like, well, Paranoia K-Set. Nobody really has freestyled to K-Set yet. So I played it on Heavy, and I saw some potential in it. And so I developed the routine, and over time, that became my routine, Paranoia K-Set. And it was me, Angel, and Ash, who originally would do it together depending on who was with who. And then for a while, we had another friend who was in DDPD later on, David Togo, and he would do K-Set with us. And then it kind of spread out I don't know if I like the way it eventually spread out, because I've seen so many other people do it, and that wasn't what we did back then. We didn't do that. Like, we didn't do other people's routines kind of without their permission, or like getting, like, you'd have to get kind of like a blessing where you'd be like, all right, you cool to do it. I think the most popular variation of my K-Set routine is Chris Beast. So if you play DDR in New York back then, you know Chris Beast. So he did his own variation of like what was originally my routine, and that gained a lot of traction, and I think that's the most popular one that people would spin off. I've seen people in New Jersey do it. I've seen people like all over the city do it or whatever. But that was kind of a tangent. So yeah, we would do routines, like me and my friends who were in DDPD, we would do routines. This is like, and then eventually I started getting into trying to play for a score, get a perfect attack. Now, this is still fifth mix, and on fifth mix, you didn't get the score of a double A unless you full comboed a song. For anybody who doesn't play DDR, if you play the whole song, at the end of the song, depending on how many steps, you got a perfect grade or a great grade or a good grade. And I forgot the other two. I know the last one is miss. I think they changed the name of it. It might be boo and miss. So perfect, great, good, boo, or miss. If you got a perfect and a great consecutively, you would it would keep your combo up of a song, like how many steps you got correct at once. And if you got every step in the song as a perfect or a great, you would get the double A grade. That was the letter grade they gave you at the end of the song. So after a while, it was pretty cool to even be able to do that. Like getting a double A on a song on fifth mix was almost as cool as like doing a freestyle, you know? This is like, people weren't really triple Aing stuff in New York City back then. There have been rumors of people triple Aing stuff here and there. I think there was a rumor of Perfect Asymmetry triple Aing Wonderland on third mix, but it was like so hard to triple A on the older mixes that it was almost, not that I didn't think that Perfect Asymmetry could do it, but it was almost unbelievable that somebody would triple A anything. We would see pictures of it on the internet on the website Aaron in Japan, but it was like, yeah, that's, you know, Japanese people, they're really good at every video game, so of course they're gonna triple A it. It wasn't really, I didn't see anybody triple A anything back then, like with my own eyes, which was expected. But people were double Aing stuff, and I started to get into that a little bit too. You know, I forgot to mention another really good player, and one of the best DDR players in New York at the time was Big Matt. And I remember I got more and more into DDR because of Big Matt. And Matt was really encouraging, and he would meet up with people. I think I would say that Matt's home arcade was NYDS, because Matt lived in Queens and NYDS was in Queens. But Matt was at Broadway City a lot from what I remember. So like he was there, like he would pop up a lot, but he would go to NYDS. And Matt was encouraging. Like, I remember Matt just being like, oh, you know, you have potential. Like, he would say stuff along those lines to me. So I liked playing with Matt. He was way better than me, but I did like playing with Matt a lot. And Matt would do stuff on Fifth Nicks. Back in Fifth Nicks, Matt was really good. He would double A all these crazy songs. And he always played those songs with like weird step patterns, like your Zoro no Muko type songs, and he would get like a double A on them. So Matt was like somebody that kind of caught my attention. Stefan was doing good too, but you know, Matt caught my attention. There's one story where it kind of changed the tide of New York City DDR. It was like officially, unofficially, that Sean Ironfoot was like the top DDR player, one of the top DDR players. And Stefan was kind of coming up to be one of the top DDR players too. He wasn't doing so much freestyle anymore. So there was like a challenge. I don't know who challenged who or how it came about, but it was Stefan versus Sean on like a Friday night. Stefan versus Ironfoot on a Friday night in Broadway City. This is like anticipated. Everybody was gonna show up for this. Like, everybody was like, you know, they're playing each other. Who's gonna get more perfects? And it was like a standard. I think it was like a standard set. I don't know if they pre-picked the 3 songs that they were gonna play, or it was like they picked, one person picked one and another person picked another, and then the third song was gonna be completely random. Now, this may have been a little before I joined DDPD, or like right when I joined. So like me and Stefan weren't like close. It was like we were still kind of like, it was an acquaintance. So because I was like considered a neutral party in this competition that they were having, I was gonna pick the third song. And at the time, you know, I was nutty because like that's just how I was. Like, I was this guy from Brooklyn, you know, I used to like to dance a lot. So like I didn't care. I was just gonna go, whatever song I was gonna pick, it was just gonna be whatever. And it was, the general consensus was that the song Leading Cyber was the most difficult song in Fifth Mix because of the middle part, that Digital Storm part. I don't know if I would agree with that now, but back then that's what people used to say. You could ask, like, as a newbie, I'd be like, what's the most difficult song on Fifth Mix? What do you think? Perfect Asymmetry, or like whoever. And most people would say Leading Cyber is the most difficult song. So they played their set, and the first song they played, I don't remember. And I think like one of them, either Ironfoot or Superman, you know, Sean or Stefan, probably remembers this better than me. But they played their first 2 songs. Now they call me up. Everybody calls me up to the stage because, you know, not playing for Arrows, or maybe I switched my nickname to Sketch at the time, which was also like how most people know me. They're like, you have to pick the third song, you know, pick the third song. So I scroll right to Leading Cyber because I just want to see both of them play it, because they're both like really good at DDR. And like I pick it and everybody's like, oh, he like picked Leading Cyber. And the thing about it was that Sean was they call him Ironfoot because he got really good at playing DDR by using one of his feet for like 3 arrows. Like he would play really difficult songs, and like say it was his right foot, he would use his left foot for the left arrow, and he would use his right foot for the up, right, and down arrow. And he would play Paranoia like that and all. He was really good like that, apparently. But with Leading Cyber, you can't do that. Like, you can't play Leading Cyber with like one foot on one arrow and another foot handling the other 3 arrows. So Stefan beat Sean in that match, and that was kind of like unofficially where the tides turned, where like Stefan kind of surpassed Sean. And to me, it was a big deal. I don't know how big of a deal it was to Stefan at the time, but it was like Stefan beat Ironfoot, you know, Superman beat Ironfoot or whatever. So, and then it was weird because the weird thing about it was that at this time, after Ironfoot, really, Deshaun, Perfect Asymmetry, was like the next up to be the best in New York. And then after Deshaun, it was Stefan, and then after Stefan, it was me. Not that it was supposed to be like that, because I feel like there were other people who should have taken over for that, but that's how it played out. So even though Stephen beat Ironfoot, Deshaun Perfect Asymmetry really took over from there. And the cool thing about the way this whole thing played out was like, for every time somebody stepped up to the forefront of being like the best DDR player in New York, their recognition expanded. And like Sean was known in New York and New Jersey for the most part. Deshaun was known in our region of the country and like mostly along the East Coast. Even though Deshaun was arguably one of the best players in the country, that's just kind of how he was known. As the internet expanded, the recognition would expand, and Stephen was known throughout most of the country if you were looking at scores. Definitely, Stephen was definitely the best on the East Coast at the time when he played. So that's kind of like, I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but like this is like how my introduction into competitive, like the beginnings of competitive DDR. This is like third mix, so like this is the end of third mix. Sorry, not third mix. This is like the end of fifth mix. What really pushed me into it was I entered a tournament in the beginning of fifth mix. I went like 0-2 in the tournament. I played Big Matt and I played Deshaun. It was an NYDS tournament. I went 0-2. I wasn't beating them. When I got a little bit better, there was a tournament in an arcade in Long Island called Green Acres Mall. And I had been playing with Big Matt, and I was obsessed with the song Rhythm and Police. Like, I loved Rhythm and Police. There were a couple songs that I was able to double A, like Ecstasy, maybe Can't Stop Falling in Love, Speed Mix. But I was obsessed with Rhythm and Police. I loved this song. And that was like the unofficial theme of my group, DDPD. Like that was kind of what they associated with, because Omar, Officer O, could stealth Rhythm and Police. So I went to this tournament not expecting to really do anything, because there were a couple of good players there, but Jimin, Vagrant Fiend, he was there. So he was like slated to win. If nobody else was going to be there except him and like me and other people, he was going to win. But I had just been playing with Matt in Coney Island, and Matt had been like encouraging me to get better and better, that I just so happened to like have a couple of songs up my sleeve. Now the key thing here is that when I went to this tournament, there was no rule that said you could not pick the same song over and over again. So when I went to this tournament, I would play people, and if I didn't know if they were good or not, or if somebody was like, oh, this person's really good, I would just pick Rhythm and Police on them. And at the time, I had played Rhythm and Police so much that I was like consistently double Aing it, and I was getting like 20, 25 greats, which back then was really good on Rhythm and Police. Like that was considered good. Like nobody was really doing that except like the other really good players. So I would play somebody, I'd pick Rhythm and Police. The best player out there at the time was this guy, his nickname was Strider. I don't remember his real name. He was a cool guy. Like, and I played him, I picked Rhythm and Police. So for the final match, I forgot exactly how it played out, but it was me and Jimin, me versus Vagrant Fiend. And I picked Rhythm and Police on him, and I just don't think that he was as good at it as it. Jimin was to be clear, Jimin was better than me in DDR at this time, but he just wasn't better than me at Rhythm and Police. And I think it was a perfect attack tournament, not like 2 out of 3, which maybe I'll make a video on my thoughts on like tournament format and all that. But I think like whatever I got on Rhythm and Police, it was a lot more than him, and I wound up winning the tournament. It was like completely unexpected. So I was like, wow, I actually won a tournament, and I'm getting good scores on all these fifth mix songs. And I like the prize was like $20 in tokens for the arcade. I just gave all the tokens out. It was a really fun day. I remember I went home really happy that day, and this was like the beginning of like me getting into like competitive DDR. The beginnings of it, where I was like, well, maybe this is kind of what I want to do. My nickname at some point changed from not playing for arrows to sketch. My nickname on my graffiti tag in high school was sketch. That's what my friends, a lot of my friends call me sketch. But I think not playing for arrows was like a little too much, and I had realized that I wasn't even really trying to freestyle anymore. Like I had been more and more attracted to playing for score and not playing for a routine. Subsequently, routines were dying out. Like it was becoming less and less popular to come up with DDR freestyle routines. So I switched my nickname to Sketch. And that was like, this time period was like the end of it. This is like the end of like me like being super casual and the beginnings of me being more competitive. Before I wrap the video up, I do want to mention that another driver for a lot of us being better in DDR was what I used to call the fifth mix wars. On fifth mix, if you played a song, it would put your score, it would save the score on the machine. And this created like really good rivalries between different arcades, specifically New York and New Jersey. At this time, New Jersey was better than New York. They had a lot of good players. They had 10, Jackie. I think she had a boyfriend who was also really good at DDR. Antonio WBR. Like there were a lot of good players in New Jersey, and like we would go back and forth on the DDR forums on like what scores people were able to produce on fifth mix. Even within New York, like if Broadway City had a top score, then you know people would go to Chinatown to like beat other people's scores. And there are people who probably remember this better than me because I only started getting involved in like the fifth mix wars at the end of fifth mix, like right before seventh mix came out. But like the scoring was weird because if you got like greats at the end of the song, your score would be higher than if you got the same amount of greats in the beginning of a song. I don't know. The scoring was a little weird, but like people would like do all kinds of crazy stuff to try to get high scores. They would play like it was almost like Marvel vs. Capcom 2, where like I think in Marvel vs. Capcom 2, at the end of it all, everybody played the same team, like Magneto, Storm, Sentinel, or something like that. And for fifth mix, it was like, man, what was it? It was like No Limit. The songs that you had to pick that gave you the highest chance of getting a high score was like No Limit, Insertion, and like a third. So it was like a group of like 3 to 7 songs that had the most steps that guaranteed that you would get like the best high score. And I used to try to, at the tail end of fifth mix, I was involved in that too. So I was trying to like lower my grade count and get more and more perfects. So that was fun. And by the end of that, I was like hooked onto perfect attack. I still had a lot of improvement to do. Like I wasn't good at stuff. And like at this time, like I said, New York for some reason we skipped mixes. I don't know, all the arcades skipped mixes. Maybe they were just coming out too quickly for New York City arcades to keep up. But we never had a DDR Max in New York. And the only place that I think that they did have it, that not a lot of people knew about, or that maybe they got it late, was this arcade in Staten Island called South Beach Arcade. But people would take trips to go to New Jersey to play in the New Jersey arcades because the New Jersey arcades had DDR Max. And they would come back and they would talk about this song called Max 300 and how difficult this song was. And you know, you can't pass Max 300 unless you use the bar, and like it's almost impossible to get a good score on it. So that was like, this is like the end. I'm talking like what I'm talking about is like me going from like super casual to like competitive, but like I'm still one of like 40 to 50 like decent players in New York. So it, you know, that's kind of how I got into perfect attack.